Hi, this is about Outriders, but it's a little bit more detailed than you'd think. We're going to talk about every facet of the demo that Bear's talking about. I'm going to talk about my thoughts, my feelings on the demo, my expectations on what's going to happen later on with the full game when it releases, and the points of interest more so that I found that spoke to me as a gamer, as a reviewer, as a creator. So, let's get into it.
Woke up in the morning, it's a long road. Kiss on the evening, it's a long road. Yeah.
Let's talk Outriders. So, to start off with, what's an Outrider? An Outrider is a group of semi-military, mercenary, high-skilled hybrid people who are drafted to effectively scout and act as the military backbone of the new frontier of humanity. The ones to go out into the stars and help colonize a new world. Enoch. Enoch is where humanity ends up going. Some 500,000 strong. You land on Enoch, discover its great new world, and are there to effectively be the scouting party to help with the colonization effort. Unfortunately, things go very, very wrong. The anomaly is soon discovered. An unprecedented storm of unimaginable power that has some kind of mysterious quality to it that starts just wreaking havoc upon you and all of your Outrider buddies. You are the only one to have survived the initial storm that you come across, but are still very badly injured. As a result, you're put into stasis, awaiting some kind of medical assistance. Unfortunately, that medical assistance does not come, and some 30 years later, you are finally reawakened by pure chance, and are thrust into the world of Outriders as we know it today. Initial thoughts? There are some parts of this that I do really enjoy. The story has a lot of potential here. And without drawing too much of a comparison to my main game, Destiny, there are a lot of ways the story can be progressed, and all the ways the story can be fleshed out through the different characters, the backstories, the lore, effectively, surrounding Enoch and the wider universe. So I'm very excited to see where this might end up going. However, there are some parts of it that are let down in the initial experience for the demo. There are some dialogue options that didn't really land well for me personally. Some others that were fantastic, but there was a lot of switch between comedic and serious tones, which, when done well, can be great, but especially with the chop and change nature that you can take the story and its side quests, you can go from a very serious main mission into almost light-hearted side mission out of absolutely nowhere. So the shift in tone can be a little jarring. But apart from that, it does certainly deliver on the story it's trying to tell, at least in the first couple of hours that you play this. So it's definitely something to look out for at this stage. However, just be aware that there are some tonal shifts which we've been informed do tend to even themselves out later on down the line, but at this stage, we'll just have to wait and see what happens. Up next for the Outriders experience is camera shake and motion blur. There was quite a lot of outcry when the demo was released due to the amount of camera shake and motion blur found on PC and all consoles, both in-game cutscenes and traversing through the world, especially in the main city. Now, Outriders has addressed this in a patch note coming out on day 1, and will be monitoring the client experience further into Outriders when it fully releases. So be sure to check out the Outriders subreddit for any further information regarding future patches and current day 1 patch notes that are on the website. Leading into that as well, loading screens and loading times. Now, from my experience in playing Outriders, I certainly found that for a game of its size, especially in this day and age, the amount of loading screens and times were just too much. I like the game, and I certainly will be covering it as much as possible, but I do have to be honest with you guys and say that I just did not like the sheer amount of loading times and loading screens that were in the game. I understand the reasonings for it, and Outriders have come out in an interview and stated the reasons for it. It's just something I hope that they're able to optimize later on and give us a bit more clarity into that at some point in the future. And that's something, as an aside, I do certainly have to commend them for. Their honesty and their open communication, regular communication regarding all facets of the game have been absolutely fantastic. So I really have to commend them for it. They are up there with Destiny for me in terms of their levels of communication regarding the game. I'm very, very pleased with that. I have yet to play it on console, so I haven't experienced any of the issues that have come out regarding console playthroughs, PS4, PS5, Xbox One, and Xbox X, and so on. But I will certainly be getting it on PS5 at some point to experience it at its highest capacity on a console. So look forward to that. Now moving on. The environment. Look, it's a demo, so don't expect too much out of it, but it's very grey, it's very brown, very muted colours, and understandably so. The main section of the demo does take place in such environments. However, I am looking forward to experiencing a more depth of colour and a more expansive world to explore, something I hope that they do end up going through and expanding on at some point through any like DLCs or things of that nature. So give it a bit of a shot, give it a bit of a chance. At first, it will change, but it's a little bit too drab and grey for me at the moment, where the demo sits. The next section is gameplay. Gameplay, gunplay, movement, things of that nature. The gameplay itself is pretty solid. Any game coming out these days, especially one that's been worked on so heavily by a skilled group of people, it's going to be relatively solid. So, the movement feels very fluid. There are issues here and there with different facets, which I will touch on. But, all in all, it's a very solid game. Don't expect anything that's going to be groundbreaking, genre-defining, or anything like that. It's not trying to be more than what it is. And I appreciate that. It's good to see a game living up to the expectations that it sets for itself, but it doesn't try to overpromise and underdeliver. In saying that, there's no jumping in this game. You don't jump, apart from one cutscene so far was in the demo. So it's a bit weird going into a game like this without the ability to be able to jump, or move over barriers or anything like that without switching cover. That also leads us into cover. Now, cover has been something that has been addressed so far by Outriders that they are looking to. They will be releasing a patch for it. It is getting worked on. But for a game that outrightly states cover is for cowards, it's in their promotional material. Cover is so important to this game. It's so important. It's one of those things you just absolutely need, but you're constantly forced to move all the time. With the amount of shots coming from enemies from different directions, and melee enemies running straight up towards you, and grenades getting thrown directly to where you are, no matter where the enemy is a little frustrating at times. But that's why the game runs. It wants you to be aggressive. It wants you to force you into those situations. But there are certainly times where you can get very overwhelmed and die relatively easily, no matter your current level or world tier. So it does require a little bit of strategy and smart thinking when playing through various different sections of the game. But cover is something that I am looking forward to seeing what they do with in the patches that are going to be coming out for it. So be on the lookout for that. Now, let's get into more about the guns. What have we got a hold of here? Well, the guns are fairly basic. They're nothing too special, too out there. They're not trying to be too futuristic, to the point of being unintelligible or completely unusable in an unnatural sense. The guns do feel natural enough to use, so I do enjoy that. However, the gunplay, it does feel a little strange for those who have been maining things like Destiny, like Call of Duty and things like that for a long period of time. It does take a little bit of adjusting, but very usable. Very, very usable. Especially the things like the shotguns, sniper rifles, things like that are relatively fairly easy to use. And there's not a large selection, much that you would find in COD and games of that ilk. So it's not going to be something that's going to be overwhelming for you. Classes and modding. You are an Outrider, blessed with the abilities from the Storm to become an Altered, and as such you get access to 3 separate classes. Sorry, 4, I do apologise. Pyromancer, Trickster, Devastator, and my personal favourite, the Technomancer. Each particular class gives you the access to do a bunch of different things for different situations. For example, the Technomancer is a very support and healing based class, does a lot of sniping and long distance damage and things of that nature, freezes enemies, slows them down, poisons them, and there are skill trees to reflect that. The skill trees themselves aren't as detailed as I would have liked to have seen. There's not as much of variety necessarily with them. It's more just this thing does this thing for a certain amount of time. That's more or less it. There's obviously more detail to it than what I'm stating, but I would certainly say check out MTash's videos on them. He's certainly doing a breakdown of them at the moment, so definitely go check them out. But where the whole system really kicks into play is the mods. Now, you'll gain access to the ability to be able to mod your armor and weapons later on in the game when it actually releases. But what we do know about mods at this moment is they have a drastic effect on the way that you will play the game, and will have probably more of an effect on your total outfit and how you use it than I would say the skill trees do. But reserving judgment on that, full judgment anyway, until later on when I have finished the game. That also leads us on to interrupts. Now, this is something that isn't new to the first-person shooter or RPG genres as it is, but it is something that is treated a little differently in Outriders. You have certain interrupt abilities that can interrupt a boss's skill that they're trying to pull off, a heal or ultimate attack or anything like that, and if you can get that off, that's great, and then it'll have a bit of a cooldown for when you can interrupt again, and there are certain mobs and things like that that either assist with that or not. But it's certainly something that you need to work yourself around and adds to that strategic aspect of the game. So it's something I do enjoy, and there are people out there who have already thought of all the different ways that they can do that and strategize and optimized and all that. So it's not entirely surprising, but certainly something to be on the lookout for guides and things like that. Those will be out relatively quickly, I would imagine. Moving on. The game world. The game world is not open. It's not an open world in the truest sense. There are specific pathways to get to certain areas that you need to go down, but you're not tied to only going down them once or anything like that. You have the ability to explore around them, so it is semi-open in the way that I would perceive it as being semi-open in that aspect, but you are forced into very specific areas, which I mean is the same for most games, but it's not as open, at least in the first stages, that I would have liked. But it's not as rigid as I was fearing it would be either, so it hits a nice little middle ground there. Now, as this video is already going to be far longer than it probably should be, we're going to cover the rest of the content that I want to talk about today. Endgame content. Now, we've already got this confirmed that we do have post-campaign content called expeditions, which will increase in difficulty level dependent on the world tier level, all the way up to world tier 15, and the final expedition, the 15th expedition, will unlock once we have access to that tier and have completed the other expeditions. Do check out the videos on the Outriders YouTube channel, which detail all the information about this, and a bunch of other information about the game that's really insanely handy to know. Like, I cannot stress enough how important it is to go through and watch those videos. Do so. I'm looking forward to it. The expeditions do look like they're a lot of fun, like kind of mini raid-ish kind of content, so yeah, looks like it'll be interesting. World tier and difficulty levels. I like this system so far. I love the way it's set out, the easy and accessible way to increase the potential gear drops and things like that. Fantastic. Scalable, doable, fantastic. I'm really excited to dive more into this as we get into it. Now we get to something that I lost my mind with when I played the demo and absolutely adore as a result. Australian inclusiveness. As an Australian, it does feel a little like we're left out of a lot of games and game worlds, especially in today's day and age. While we are a first world country and we're predominantly white of English origin. I understand that there's not a lot of call for having Australians or Australian characters or Australia featured in a lot of games, and it is just so nice when we see any kind of hint towards our Aussie homeland. And you do see that. One of the vendors in the city do actually have hung up on their wall for the world to see an Australian flag. Thank you, Outriders. Thank you, Square Enix. Thank you, People Can Fly. Thank you, everyone. It's just so nice to be included as an Australian. For something like this, just this nice little nod, and to be in such a prominent place in the game as well, makes my, little Aussie heart sing. So, yeah, I do really appreciate that. And I'm hoping to find an Aussie character later on in the story if one happens to pop up in the world somewhere. Fingers crossed. Otherwise, if they need to eventually end up coding one in, I am always free for any kind of voice work that needs to be done. So, Square, feel free to hit me up. Job offers aside, let's get into it. The final section of this video. Overall, I really like Outriders for what it is. It is a semi-fast-paced, semi-open world RPG that has mixtures of fantasy and sci-fi elements taking place in the near future, and has a lot of potential to be a very lore-heavy game. I love the dense RPG system that's set out, the way you can craft your mods and search for mods, and the weapon and armor drops, and the way they affect the 4 different classes and the skill trees, and the way that all interacts together, and being able to team up with like 3 people, and it's fantastic. But being able to delve into that, there's going to be a lot of people spending a lot of time trying to figure out the best strats for everything and doing some just insanely stupid stuff, and I love it. I cannot wait. It's one of those things that I am just really looking forward to. I will be doing quite a number of videos on Outriders once it's released. I will be doing a full review of the game once I've finished it, both campaign and expeditions. Debating whether or not to do those separately, but we'll see what happens. I will also be covering the story of Outriders, the story of the different characters, the lore behind each particular weapon and character and place, and everything in relation to the game, so do be on the lookout for that. I will be very much delving deep into the lore, so yeah, it's going to be fun. Anyway, thank you for watching the video. I really do hope you enjoy it, and be on the lookout for the game when it releases, April 1st, midnight, around the world, for wherever you currently are, and also it'll be April 2nd, 3 AM Australian Eastern Standard Time for myself. Pray for me, it's going to be a difficult night. That'll be April 2nd, 3 AM Australian Eastern Standard Time for those on PC. So whatever they might be in your particular time zone. But anyway, do all the things, the likes, the subscribes, and the comments, and the shares, and the stuff. I really do appreciate it. But as always, I just appreciate that you viewed this video to begin with. Anyway, I've been the Ice Warrior 209, and I'll catch you all next time.